I'm your host, Sean MacKenzie. Thank you for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our WebForms playlist, and we're going to take a look at how to get the username of the currently logged in user for our application so that we can do things like arrange security or show or display different functions and things like that. Now, in previous episodes, we have gone through a bunch of different controls and things like that, and we're going to continue to cover more controls. But I thought at this juncture, it would be a good idea for us to get the user who's using our application. Let's get to it. Okay, guys, so we return to our Visual Studio that we've been working on over the past few episodes. Make sure to go back to the beginning if you haven't done so yet. And today what we're going to do is we're going to go in and get the username. This is our solution here with our tow operations for our fictional tow truck listing that we have online in Azure using both an app service app and an Azure SQL database. And if we hit go on our toolbar there, you'll see that it fires up our application. You can see it's a local, you can see that it's running in the local host up above there, but this is what it looked like so far with some controls on it. You can see it has a listing with select and it has some controls on the right hand side. And if we actually go to the website that we created in Azure, so this is public facing, we created it and we can log in here. And remember, we set this up for Microsoft authentication, and so you can see it's doing the multi-factor authentication. So I have to go to my authenticator on my phone, and so we have that security attached to our application. And so you can see that it opens here, and it opens in a public facing website, which is awesome. And you can see we can click on the items in the list and they populate on the right hand side, and we have an update button at the bottom. That was sort of how far we got with our little app. And but we don't really have the user. We would like to be able to not only say welcome so and so to the application, but also we want to do some security. You might want to have a security table, or you might just want to say this person can do this or that. And so that's what we're going to look at getting today, is just getting the username. We're not going to set up the security apparatus, but we are going to return the username so that we can do that in the future. Okay, so I closed the browser there and I hit stop on our Visual Studio because it had Edge open with the application in it. So I hit stop and that closed it. And you can see this is the source when I double click on the default.aspx. And if I click on the design window, this looks very familiar to you guys. This is what we saw in previous episodes. You can see there's text boxes and drop down or combo boxes if you're from the Access developer world. And there's a grid view there. And so this is one of the views that we have. Now I can highlight this text in here because that's in a paragraph object, and you can see we'd like to put our name right there. Welcome, info at MacKenzieMacKenzie.com. That was the email that I logged in with before. And so we can go ahead and take a look. Now, when I click on the source, you'll see that this line was auto-highlighted because this represents what you see in the Visual Designer. And so we can actually stick our cursor in here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a little object here, a label, and labels are very, very handy because you can create them in your application and then you can populate them on the fly from the server. And so I'm just going to put ASP label, ID is label user, run at equals server, and that's it. And so that entire thing is an opening and a closing of the label. Now the opening is the first part, and the closing is the second part, and anything we put in between is the text. So there's the opening of it, and there's the closing of the label. And so any text I put in will be what we see when we run the application. But the nice thing about the label is we can change the value of it on the fly, you know, when we have, you know, the context changes or something like that. And so that's what we're going to do here. From previous episodes, you will remember that if you have your cursor in the .aspx and you hit the F7 key, or you can go to the view menu up above, but we'll put our cursor in and we'll hit F7, and that takes us to the code behind for this page. And so you'll see hit F7 there, and it brings up this page, and this has very similar events to what you see in Microsoft Access, or if you do VB6 development or anything like that. You'll see that there's page load events, and you can make your own subroutines and all. There's button click events and all kinds of stuff. And what we have here is we've got the loading of our page, and that postback is, it basically means when the page is first loaded. If it's a postback, that means that there's some action going on the page. We don't necessarily want to reload every single time that somebody clicks a button. We only want to load it the first time through. In this case, you might want to load it every time. It really depends on what you're doing. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this after the is postback for this case, and that's going to help us to get our username. Now you'll see what I did there is I got the http context.current.user.identity.name, and that's going to get the current identity from the system that's running the application, and it's sort of like our first attempt to get the username. Now we need to pay attention to the fact that we are developing locally on our own computer, but then we're also deploying this into an app service on Azure, which has a different way to get the username. And so when we're running it locally, this first string str user is going to get loaded, but when we move it and we put it on Azure App Services, that's going to return a different kind of string. And so we're actually going to say if the length of the user is 0, so if it doesn't return anything, or if it's an IIS user, then we're going to try to get a different username. We're going to try to reload that string as well. And you might need to put a third condition saying or left is, or the string includes app local. That's another one that might show up. So pay attention to that. But what we're going to do here is we're going to say the user is equal to the system.security.principal Windows identity, and we're going to get the current .name. And so that's going to give us the email name. I'm going to use info@MacKenzieMacKenzie.com to log in first, and then I'll use another email that I have that has been invited to collaborate with my company, and so you need to make sure that you do that as well. Next, we're going to load that user label that we created in our markup page, and that's going to be LBL user label user.text is equal to the variable that we loaded there. And so once we put that in, we're good to go. That's going to load only on the first time that the page loads, and then once it's there, the value will be persistent, and so we are good to go. I can hit F5, or you can click on the IIS play button at the top, and it should start your local development environment here, and there we go. So this is what I wanted to see. You can see it says welcome, and then it gives me like my machine name and then my username, and that's really what you can expect to see in the local environment. So you can see here is the local host yours will be different .44335. That's the port number, and that's what we want to see for local development, and that's awesome. So it looks like it's working, and then when we move this to Azure and we put it into the app service and we publish it, it's going to change. The value that comes back is going to be more like an email address type ID. Next, we just go build and then publish, and you'll get this familiar screen that you saw in previous episodes, and we only have one of our profiles in there. That's our tow operations, and I'm just going to click publish on that because I'm already logged into my Visual Studio, and so you can see that this is going to go ahead and it's going to sort of reach out to the app services in Azure, and it's going to publish our app according to what we've just done. So you can see it sort of starts and then it goes boom, done, and then it launches the site immediately using your default browser, and that's what we want to see there. You can see that it is starting a full HTTPS tow operations. This is a full internet address, public facing, and that's what we want to see. And it does take a bit longer to load the very first time that you publish it, or each time that you publish it. You'll see that it does actually take a while to load. And I'm going to go through the same stuff that I went through before with the login using info@MacKenzieMacKenzie.com, and then I have to do the multi-factor authentication. And you can see that it will go ahead and take that, and then it takes a minute for it to get processed. Let's see, so once it is done here, oh, it does come up, there you go, there's your tow operations, and you can see, bam, there it is. So now we've got our username into our app from the app services, that's Microsoft Active Directory single sign-on. We've got the username, so now we can use our app. You can do all kinds of postbacks and things, and actions on screen, and it keeps that username in there for us, and that's exactly what we want to see there. And so that's kind of the beginning of the process. If I close it all down there, you can see if I double click on our default.aspx again, I'll put my cursor in and hit F7, and that brings up the code just like we saw before. And you can see how this will be very, very useful. So now we've got a temporary string that we loaded, and we've got a kind of more persistent user there. But you might want to do some additional processing, maybe write a record into a table saying the user logged in. Also, you might want to determine a security level or a security group. We can look at that later in our playlist here. Okay, let's try it with another user. So if I close and reopen my browser and relog in again with a different email, and that email has been invited to collaborate with my organization in Azure, you can see I can log into the app, and it has pulled down the right username there, and that's exactly what we want to see. Just like before, we can use the app with no problem. It handles all of the activity and clicks and things, and that username is still there, and that's exactly what we want to see. And that's how you can get the username for your WebForms app. Looking for more resources for your project? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description.